Have you ever found yourself standing in a supermarket aisle, just staring at all the options and thinking, what's really going on behind all this food we buy? Well, today we're going to peel back the label and look at the hidden costs of our modern food system. We're talking everything from the flavor that's been literally bred out of our vegetables to the life that's been drained from our soil. So let's just jump right in with this quote from author Raj Patel. It's a pretty powerful idea, right? Because it kind of flips what we normally think about choice completely upside down. We're taught to believe that having more choices is freedom. But what if that freedom of choice is really just an illusion, one that's been carefully designed to guide us down a very specific and maybe not so healthy path? That's really the big question we're digging into today.
And our journey is going to start in a place we all know really well, the grocery store. You walk in, and it's this explosion of bright colors and endless aisles. It feels like this modern temple of abundance. But if we look a little closer, what's really being offered?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, the gap between what feels like variety and what's actually diverse. Sure, you can choose from over 50 brands of cereal, but get this. A report from the UK found that pretty much all of them, 27 out of 28, aimed at kids, are just packed with sugar. Or you might feel like you have a ton of coffee shops to choose from, but almost 8 out of 10 of them are actually owned by just 3 giant companies. And then there's soy lecithin, this ingredient that's hidden in almost 75% of products. It's kind of the perfect symbol of the industrial uniformity that's holding this whole system together.
So, okay, if the choice is just an illusion, then what's the reality? Well, the reality is that our food is being engineered. And I don't just mean processed. I mean it's scientifically designed for a very specific purpose. And a lot of the time, that purpose has almost nothing to do with nutrition and everything to do with shelf life, and you guessed it, profit.
You know, food scientists actually have a name for this. They call it the bliss point. And this isn't like your grandma adding a little pinch of sugar to her tomato sauce to balance the acidity. No. This is high-level mathematics, regression analysis, all to find the exact amount of salt, sugar, or fat that just lights up the reward centers in our brains. It's all about engineering a craving, making sure that chip or that cookie tastes exactly the same every single time, so we just keep coming back for more.
And this engineering goes all the way back to the farm, to the seed itself. Let's take the tomato, for example. For centuries, farmers would select plants for things like flavor, for nutrition. But the industrial system? It needs a tomato that can be picked rock hard and green, survive a 2,000-mile truck ride, and still look perfectly round and red in the store. And it turns out, the very gene that makes the tomato ripen to that uniform red color, it also switches off the genes that create sugars and flavor. We have literally bred the taste right out of our food in exchange for a uniform look.
So here's the bottom line. The food industry knows that real, honest-to-goodness hunger isn't what makes us buy another bag of chips. It's cravings. They are literally manufacturing desire that has absolutely nothing to do with what our bodies actually need to be nourished.
So, to create that perfect product, that perfectly shippable, uniformly red but totally tasteless tomato, you need an equally engineered process out on the farm. And to get that kind of uniformity on a massive scale, well, we've basically had to put our entire agricultural system on a kind of artificial life support.
And this right here shows you exactly what people mean by the chemical treadmill. It starts with planting just one crop, over and over, which sucks the same nutrients out of the soil. So what do? Instead of feeding the soil, we just dump on synthetic fertilizers, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, to feed the plant directly. But this chemical flood kills off the incredible ecosystem of microbes and worms in the soil. The natural nutrient cycle gets broken. The soil effectively dies, which means the next year you need even more chemicals to get a crop. We're treating soil like a sterile box, not a living thing, and that directly impacts the food.
This quote from the farmer, James Rebanks, man, it's just haunting. For generations, when you plowed a field, birds would flock to it for a feast of worms and insects. A silent field with no birds following the plow, that's a sign of a silent, dead soil. It's such a powerful and sad image of what we've lost.
Even something as basic as waste has been totally transformed. Traditional manure, what they used to call midden muck, was basically compost. It built up the soil. But the modern version, this liquid slurry from huge factory farms, is a high nitrogen pollutant that just runs off the fields and poisons our rivers. We've managed to turn a solution into a huge problem.
And the impact is just massive. All that fertilizer runoff creates these huge dead zones in oceans and lakes where nothing can live. Waste from giant hog farms leaches into people's drinking water. Pollution from industrial fish farms damages entire wild ecosystems. This isn't some small, contained problem. It's affecting everything.
But you know, the damage isn't just to the environment. This whole system, which is built on getting bigger and more efficient, has taken a tremendous human toll. It's been hollowing out the very communities that are supposed to be feeding us. Just look at this number, a nearly 50% drop in mid-sized farms in just 2.5 decades. These are not just statistics. These are families, family farms that have been the backbone of rural America for generations, just being squeezed out by a system where the mantra is, get big or get out. This is the slow disappearance of a whole way of life.
And this consolidation creates this ripple effect that tears through the whole community. There was this landmark study that tracked what happened in Iowa after big box stores moved in. And it wasn't just the farms that vanished. It was hundreds of hardware stores, local suppliers, drug stores. The entire economic fabric of small-town America just started to unravel.
Okay, I know that was a really heavy look at all the problems, but it's so important to understand them because there's an incredible, really hopeful movement that's working to build a better system. So what can we do? Let's talk about the path forward.
So meet regenerative agriculture. This isn't just about trying to sustain what we have. It's about actively making things better. It's a way of farming that actually partners with nature to rebuild healthy soil, to improve our water, and even to help fight climate change by pulling carbon out of the air and storing it back in the ground where it belongs.
So how does it actually work? Well, instead of constantly plowing and disturbing the soil, farmers leave it alone as much as possible. They always keep the ground covered with plants. They plant all sorts of different crops instead of just one monoculture. And here's the critical part. They focus on feeding the life in the soil, that amazing soil food web, because they know that a healthy soil ecosystem will feed the plants all the complex nutrients they really need.
And like James Rebank says, this isn't about some impossible dream of going back to the past. It's about starting right where we are and just making things better. And a huge part of that is rejecting this idea that food must always be as cheap as possible, no matter what the hidden costs are to our health, our environment, and our communities.
And this is really where it comes back to all of us. We all have a role to play in this. We can choose to buy whole foods instead of those hyper-processed items. We can ask questions at the farmer's market, find those incredible heirloom tomatoes and actually learn the story behind our food. Supporting local farmers helps build an alternative. And honestly, just valuing our food more and wasting less of it sends a really powerful message. In the end, the system we have right now, it wasn't inevitable. It was built, one decision at a time. And that means we have the power to build something different. So the real question for all of us is, what choices will we make to help create a food system that truly nourishes us all?